it's very tempting to say, okay, we probably will get a vaccine and everything will get back to normal as soon as that is ready. And I am really tempted to also say that new normal will be nothing like what we remember. I don't think the practices we had, the data we had, the norms we had will ever be exactly the way we remember them, which is okay. I think it gives us an opportunity to pause and take a step back and do make right choices for what's going forward.
We have the pleasure of welcoming Stela Lupushor to our interview series. I'm Vanessa Rose from the peopleHum team. Let's begin with just a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and the video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year, and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Stela is the founder and chief executive reframer of Reframe Work. She is also the program director, strategic workforce planning, and HR VP's counsel at the conference board, and facilitates conversations with Fortune 500 corporation members on building new global workforce strategies. She also is the Human Capital Analytics Center leader at the conference board, shaping its research agenda. Stela is also the founder, chairperson of the board of directors of Amazing, a non-profit organization extending the work horizon for women, empowering them to thrive in the workplace of the future. Welcome, Stela. We are thrilled to have you.
So thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. The first question I had for you, Stela, is could you tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you to Reframe Work?
Absolutely. So I come from a math and computer science background. That was my education. And then for majority of my career, I worked at the intersection of technology, process improvement, systems implementations, both customs as well as package system implementations. And I ventured into the HR space by chance. It was the SAP wave when all the organizations were adopting it. And I ended up being trained on SAP HR, and it felt like I found finally my place because I could relate to the changes. I could see the potential for positive impact on the experience of workers, including myself. So from that point on, HR became my focus of my work, and I did a lot of both consulting, client-facing consulting work, as well as internal work across PricewaterhouseCoopers clients, IBM when PwC was acquired, and I ended up being moving into the internal IBM HR, where I spent a good chunk of my career. And then after IBM, I went back into the people analytics space, into the math and computer science, right, by running people analytics function at TIAA and then Fidelity Investments. But 4 years ago, I decided to go solopreneur and live into the future of work. And future of work was a space that I was really passionate about and comfortable with, because I could connect the dots and I could see where the trends are going to take us from workplace perspective. And one of the things was that we as individuals are more likely than not to go entrepreneurial and to become agents, independent agents. So, but for me, a lot of that work was just a hypothetical, like a theoretical exercise. I never been on that independent side. So 4 years ago, I decided to go solo and see what it's like to be an entrepreneur, how the work environment could change, what are the skills that are necessary, what type of technology can enable you to be productive. So the focus was really not having to own all the resources, but being the orchestrator of that work, because I obviously don't have all the skills that are necessary to execute big projects, but I have a big network of people that I can tap into and bring on board to some of these projects. And I remember going through the journey and the reflection and thinking, how should I call myself, right? I have this company that I incorporated called the Framework. And if I am to look at, typical titles, you have a CEO, a founder, president. None of those felt right. They're all too big and too lofty. And I thought I'll be a little bit more lighthearted about it and call myself Chief Reframer. And then I updated my LinkedIn profile as that. And a few days later, I got a request for connection from Adam Munoz. And Adam is in framing business, as in Windows framing business. So I felt like I finally found my tribe.
That's a really interesting idea. But what opportunity did you see in the future of work for you to start this?
I felt that being on the inside of the organization, it's really difficult to change the mindset of leaders. And outside, it's much more straightforward to convey the messages about the changes that are happening around us and making them think differently about the opportunities they can see. And the way I organize my thoughts about the disruptions, I put them in the 4 categories. I call them 4Ds. One is the digitization of our world and workplace, right? So you have adoption of new technologies, you have robotics, you have automation, you have chatbots, augmented and virtual reality technologies that allows you to create different experiences, immersive experiences. All of this is creating a lot of data, a lot of insights that then you can make decisions differently. And that brings me to the second D, which is datafication. And with processing capacity and a lot more tools that enable us to make sense out of the data, we now can create new interventions. We can create nudges at the right point in time. We can see the patterns of changing behaviors to make decisions differently as an organization. The third D is demographic changes, and these are huge, somewhat slow, but huge and impactful. We have a significant aging of the population just because our healthcare is getting better. People are making better choices for their health. As a result, we live longer, and as a result, especially mature economies are experiencing a significant increase in longevity, which creates a lot of tensions. On one side, you have organizations that are not prepared necessarily to possibly either retain these individuals just because of how career arches are structured, but also take advantage of this large source of talent, but it requires slightly different thinking, right? You may not, as you get older, you may not want to work full time. Therefore, more flexibility may be needed and have schedules that allow people to contribute at the time when they can. They may not necessarily have all the auditory or visual capacities that allows them to utilize your technology in the way anyone earlier in their lifespan could do that. So you need to think about accessibility and create more user-friendly technologies for them to access it. If your physical office is not designed to be accessible for people with physical limitations, or some who may need a place for their cane or for their wheelchair, all of those require a very different thinking from organizations and investments in some of this. This is just the aging workforce. If you look at the women labor force participation, that is on a growth as well. And now we see that even what's defined as essential workers, a lot more are prevalently women. However, women have different needs for flexibility because most likely than not, they will step into caretaking roles. They will have a home, children to be homeschooled or in the midst of the crisis, or parents they need to take care of. So organizations, again, need to think differently about women's participation in the labor force and the differences in the needs they have from the workplace. And other types of demographic shifts. It's movement between geographical areas, between urban and rural areas, between countries. And while some of that is on the lockdown as we speak, I think there will be a period after which we will start at least coming back to normal, because a lot of the mobility is providing access to people to better opportunities, to better jobs, better security, whatever it is that drives their need to move. And in addition to move between geographical and physical spaces, there is also a lot of movement between jobs. And while right now we're talking about an environment where there is a significant unemployment in the US, I think how organizations are dealing with the situation and the choices they make about their workers is going to impact their brand for a long time. And top talent is going to make their choices with their feet. The last D is disintermediation. So if you think about the value chain and how companies create value, a lot of that is being disrupted by technology first companies that are moving into adjacent spaces. So one perfect example is Amazon, right? They started as an online book selling, then they moved into other types of retail activities and other product lines. Then they got into electronics, they got into content development, and they are getting into pharma and medical. They're going to Mars. There's not one single industry that they're not getting into and trying to disrupt and disintermediate. And on one side, that is, of course, for the incumbents and traditional organizations, it's a challenge because it makes them think differently about the technology adoption and digitization of their operations. On the flip side, it creates a lot of opportunities for asymmetry. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you as a company need to have all of these big resources or big infrastructure. Your size may not necessarily define your ability to be successful. So how can you think about using agility, using your strengths, using technology, using analytics to get into spaces and even create new markets and new categories?
This is really interesting. It makes so much sense. So you spoke about the 4Ds, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think humans play? What part do you think humans play there? And how can organization balance humans and tech?
Absolutely. Excellent question. And for every alliteration and framework, I have other frameworks. So the way I would answer to your question is really in another framework that I use, which is the 4Ws. Mm-hmm. So when organizations think about how to deal with all of this disruption and how they can prepare and adapt, I think the traditional ways that we've been trained to do is somewhat binary, right? We say, okay, we are going to automate, or no, we'll keep manual, or we will insource, we'll outsource, or we will centralize or decentralize. And that binary formula, it's somewhat limiting because it may not necessarily account for all the complexity in the system. The 4W framework is allowing us to create a more rich set of options and think differently about how we structure how organizations work. And the first W is work, right? You need to really get to the essence of what is the work that needs to get done. We are traditionally thinking about jobs descriptions, and let's face it, very few of us work in a job description that matches that description past day one, right? It's mostly as a filter to get you into the company, and that from that point on, a lot of the changes are instant because the reality on the ground may be very different, and we always have to adapt. So getting to the essence of what is the work that needs to get done, what are the units of that work, and what are the characteristics, right? That could be, is this a project specific, or this is an ongoing activity? Is this something that requires face-to-face interaction? Or can it be done out of anywhere? Is this the type of work that requires a lot of creative activity, or is it routine and can be described by a formula and therefore it can be automated? A lot of those characteristics then can inform the types of workers that you need to allocate. So that's second W. what is the workforce that needs to get that work done? And again, when you think about workforce, you would typically think, well, it's just regular employees or it's contingent, as opposed to saying you have a broader spectrum that you can tap into. It can be employees, it can be contingent workers, but it can be partnerships and joint ventures and teams and crowds that you can engage with and crowdsource ideas. It can be co-creating with your customers. So digital labor could be part of your workforce too. So it's tapping into this bigger spectrum of the workforce definition that then you can determine how you can allocate that workforce to get different bits and pieces of that work done. And the challenge, of course, becomes in orchestrating this complexity and assigning the right type of workforce to get the work done. But analytics can help us do that a lot more because there's a lot more data as well as insights and ability to do some of that intelligent mapping. The third W is the workplace. So if you think about what the work is and the workforce, optimal workforce that can get it done, then you can start saying, all right, what is the most optimal office or space environment that will allow this work to get done the best? And again, the spectrum is much broader. You don't have to have just a physical space. Digital, as the way we talk right now, it's just as good. Virtual or augmented reality can be another a great optimum co-working spaces, cafeteria. I think with a lot of the work now being easily done in a virtual environment, I think the physical location is not as critical, unless, of course, the job is requiring you to be present and physically able to touch and interact. But even now, with the COVID, I think was a huge wake-up call and accelerant of digital adoption. A lot of companies were trying to become digital for quite some time, and then they were forced to do it overnight. And there is a lot of realization that people can be just as effective working out of their home than being present in the office. So I think the whole notion of what the workspace of the future would look like is going to evolve as more and more companies are embracing distributed work and realizing that digital technology can enable a lot of efficiency in getting the work done. And then the last W is worth. And this is bringing back to your question, how do we bring the human back into the center of it? Worth is really about the values exchange and how you can tap into what individuals come to work for, what matters to them. Some people come to obviously make an income or get access to benefits or get access to a safe and accessible work environment. But once you solve for some of those fundamental things, there is so much more that we as humans expect or want or would like to get from the workplace, be that, simplicity in our tooling and how we get the work done, or ability to learn a new skill, or belong to a community of people and have friends at work, or working on some bigger mission and purpose that we feel we have an impact on the world around us, or leaving a legacy, or self-transcendence, or pride in the products. So again, this provides a bigger spectrum of options to tap into for companies and saying, look, yes, money is one component, but there is so much more that we as a brand enable you to fulfill and get out of this relationship. So that human-centric ways of thinking is now going to give HR and organizations in general a broader spectrum of options to tap into and cater and make it more compelling for individuals to come and work there for, and include that in their messaging, of course, and in the designing and decisions they're making related to their workplace.
But how do you think organizations can focus on employee experience while following the 4 Ws that you just spoke about?
A lot is about thinking not as traditional HR. I think we've always said, okay, you have a talent acquisition department, you have a onboarding process, you have a compensation payroll. So we organize the processes around the departments on how we organized, as opposed to saying, what is it a normal day in a life of an employee look like, or a manager? Can we observe from the moment when they wake up? Maybe they have a long commute, or maybe not, or maybe they have a commute to their kitchen where they turn on the computer. How are they accessing their work tools? What does that experience look like? Are they enabled to get their work done in the fastest and most optimal way? Do they get a satisfaction in the process of that? What are the barriers and little frictions that get created? Like, if you get up in the morning and you have a long commute time and you get stressed by the time you get to the office, and then you start booting up your computer and then it shuts down just because your equipment is too old and it hasn't been updated. Finally, you logged in and then your password expired and you have to reset it and you forget the password. And it's, by the time you're able to be productive, it's already noontime. Obviously, you're not going to have a good productive day, as opposed to saying, can we simplify that experience and move all the complexity behind the wall so the employees can get their work done in the most optimal way? And that requires a very different collaboration between HR, between the IT, between the space planning and real estate planning, and looking at it from a human-centered design, observing how people interact, how they get the work done, how they coalesce at that water cooler. What are the flows that there is a potential for some disruption or some friction, and how can you eliminate those friction and hassles, so to speak, in the process of getting the work done?
So it's the entire organization that has to work towards it.
Absolutely. It's a very different way of thinking. And I think the opportunities now, especially as more and more individuals are now forced to work from home, and it's very tempting to just automate about processing. Okay, they've been doing this in the office, we're just going to automate and make it the same for them if they're working in a distributed environment. And it's probably short-sighted to do that. Instead of saying, now we have the chance to actually do it right, how can we make it better? How can we use human-centered design thinking, inclusive design thinking, accessibility principles, and just human dynamics, and make it for a better experience? So the same thing that happened to customer experience, and we've been trained now so much by all of these technology providers on what a really good experience looks like. How can we bring that to the workplace inside the organization?
So what according to you are the best strategies for organizations to create a differentiated work culture?
It's a tough one. I think it's very specific to organizations, but a lot it's about the values they want to be known for, right? When I was describing those employment values and the multiple things that we can tap into, it's impossible to be known for everything, right? But you need to make a choice and saying, I want to be known that I am the most ethical company and I am providing the easiest work environment for people to be in. And then deliberately going at it to leave it through everything you do. What is the work experience look like? How are we making decisions about the policies and the processes we put in place? How are we communicating the language we use? How are we developing and encouraging managers to operate and interact with their individual or the team members? All of that has to be permeated. The values that you decide to be known for can permeate all the decisions that you're making in the organization. And it's specific to each company, but I think there will be certain elements that have to be consistent, right? Those ethical, humanizing, and authentic points of views. Now more than ever, people are listening and they're paying attention to the tone of the leadership and the decisions they're making on how they're treating employees, even though they may have to furlough or they may have to lay off. How the process itself is experienced will lay the foundation for many years to come on how brands are going to be perceived and how their culture is going to be remembered by.
I think it's going to be an ongoing process. It's not just.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think will be the new normal once all this is over? How do you think organizations are going to adapt to it?
It's really difficult to predict and project because a lot of variables are going to influence what that looks like, right? Will there be a vaccine? And even if there will be a vaccine, will it be effective, or will we see mutations? Um, would companies survive? Would certain industries even survive, or will they return? And if we return to new normal, will social physical distancing continue to be for a long time? Will that change social norms on how we as humans connect with each other? Like, I am a hugger. I'm going to have a tough time. I think a lot of people, the hugging times are behind us now. But we can start thinking about potential changes in the following four categories. One, at the individual level, right? What could the changes potentially be? Will there still be a need for safety, right? For self-care? A lot more people will experience fatigue because right now everybody is running on adrenaline, and there will be a point where after which the exhaustion is going to kick in. Many people lost their families or friends, and they're experiencing grief. Mental health has been a bigger challenge, but now with the COVID, it's becoming even a bigger problem that the companies need to pay attention and investing in employees' well-being and making sure they're taken care of. So this is just the basic fundamental individual level. Then you get to the level of teams. How do you manage in distributed ways if that's the reality for you? How you form connections to the brand and to the company's ethos and to each other? How do you build confidence and trust? How do you measure performance if you don't see the individuals day in and day out? What are the new teaming norms and practices that will have to be formed and ways of working? It's almost kind of a new territory that the teams, the intact teams or distributed teams will need to figure out a way to deal with it. The next level is at the business level. And if your company is lucky to be in opportunity mode or adaptation, there is a need to rebalance the talent across areas that may not be as busy or maybe shrinking to growing parts. Or if you're in survival mode, how are you planning to do that survival and make sure that your business stays afloat, at least for the time being? How do you build that business resilience into your operations? Over the past 10 decades, we've been trying to really reduce any slack and make it very efficient working. And I think that kind of proved to be a weak spot, and a lot of companies now need to have to build in slack back into the system so they can have that resilience. At the same time, how can you create resilience for the workforce as well? How can you ensure their mental and physical and well-being is preserved so you can have a responsive workforce that can be mobilized around whatever the new challenge that comes up or whatever the new reality comes up? How do you ensure the tone at the top of the company and how leaders are responding to the communications and engaging with the workforce to keep them appraised and be authentic and be normal and say, yes, I don't have all the answers, or yes, I'm dealing with interruptions during the Zoom calls because my dogs are barking or my kids are running around. Real estate, how companies will have to rethink their physical space if there is a need to even preserve the space and presence, or do you shrink the footprint, or do you put it further out of the metropolitan areas into suburbs closer to where the employees work? Are you going to provide private transportation options just because people may be hesitant to take the public transportation, etc.? And then the last level is really at the community level. How can across industries organizations work with each other? There is an initiative right now that there is a coalition spearheaded by Accenture, Lincoln Financial, ServiceNow, and Verizon, CHROs, to help do that rebalancing of talent across industries, taking from organizations that have excess talent or they're planning to furlough or lay off, and moving those individuals to organizations that are increasingly looking to ramp up their operations. So that's a perfect example of taking your head above the organizational boundaries and doing the right things for the community in general, or using your strengths to um, to, to convey or deliver something for the benefit of the community. Like some of the companies are using their marketing strength, right, to say stay at home or respect the social distancing requirements. How can you create donations or rescue package to relieve the small businesses that right now are in big need and they need to stay afloat? So it's different levels that we are now being called to consider. And it's a dire time, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of unknowns, but I think coming at it with the right mindset and having your heart in the right place will go a long way. As I said before, everybody's watching now how companies make decisions. So it's paving a way for the new, more responsible leadership and more humanizing approach to the world around us and the workplace.
You put it in a very nice way. I like the way you created levels for it to prioritize our. So, Stella, do you have any thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
I think um, it's very tempting to say, okay, we probably will get a vaccine and everything will get back to normal as soon as that is ready. And I am really tempted to also say that new normal will be nothing like what we remember. I don't think the practices we had, the data we had, the norms we had will ever be exactly the way we remember them, which is okay. I think it gives us an opportunity to pause and take a step back and do make right choices for what's going forward. And what I would encourage everybody to do is think, what is the right answer, right? How would you, if you had a blank sheet of paper, what would you want this to look like? And use this time as an opportunity to craft that. It is time for really taking stock. It's a time to accelerate a lot of changes, just because you now have the chance to do that, to say, look, we're all learning as we go. We're all experimenting. So experiment with the right things. Use this as a chance to do what's right.
It's a great time to be productive and work on yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so thank you, Stella. I had an amazing time talking to you,
Thank you
and
for the
all our
opportunity.
audience is going to love this too.
Hope so. And looking forward to hearing feedback. I don't have any answers or all the answers, so I'd love to hear from others what they think about this
Yeah,
time.
definitely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Vanessa. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.